वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचानूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णो वन्दे जगद्गुरुं श्रीकृष्णो वन्दे जगद्गुरुम् ॐ श्रीकृष्णार्पणमस्तु. Pranams from Dr. R.J. Kalpana. Welcome to the study of the Bhagavad Gita. In this session, we will commence our study of chapter 17, the penultimate chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, ShraddhaTrayaVibhagaYoga. The classification of the three types of faith. Now, in the previous chapter, chapter 16, the last two shlokas, 23 and 24, Sri Bhagavan Krishna says that the Veda Shastras should be your only guide in determining what is dharma, what is adharma. And having understood the Shastras, follow the path to attain perfection and the supreme goal of union with the Divine. To act in an arbitrary fashion without following as ordained by the Shastras results in not attaining God realization. And therefore, it is very interesting that in this chapter 17, Arjuna has a question. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Atha ShraddhaTrayaVibhagaYogo Nama Saptadashodhyayaha. Shloka 1. Arjuna said, those who endowed with faith worship gods and others, casting aside the injunctions of the scriptures. Where do they stand, Krishna? In sattva, rajas or tamas? So having listened to Krishna's injunctions of having to follow the path as ordained by the Shastras, Arjuna says that there are people who have faith, who have Shraddha, who have Bhakti, and therefore they too worship gods, but they might not be aware of the Shastraic instructions. They might lack the means, the knowledge, the wherewithal to understand the Veda Shastras. And yet they too are full of faith and bhakti. So where do these type of people, where do they stand, Krishna? What is their fate, Krishna? Arjuna asks. In Shloka 2 and 3, Sri Bhagavan Krishna gives a brief reply to Arjuna's query. So Shloka 2, Sri Bhagavan said, that untutored innate fate of men is of three kinds: sattvika, rajasika, tamasika. Hear of it from me. So Krishna now explains that faith, the Shraddha for people are based on their innate nature. And their nature can be sattvika, rajasika or tamasika. So Shraddha is dependent on their gunas. Shloka 3. The faith of all men conforms to their mental constitution, Arjuna. This man consists of faith. Whatever the nature of his faith, he is verily that. So, keeping in line with the earlier shloka, Krishna continues in the same vein by saying that the Shraddha, the faith of men, depends on their mental frame of mind, depends on their nature of their being. Whatever the nature, that will result in a corresponding faith. Shloka 4. Men of sattvika disposition worship gods. Those of rajasika temperament worship demigods, while others of tamasika disposition worship the spirits of the dead and ghosts. So now Krishna goes further to explain that depending on the nature of men, they will organically gravitate towards certain types of behavior and towards certain types of faith. So therefore, people who are endowed predominantly with sattvika temperament will worship the divine, the highest of the high, and they will not compromise on that. People with rajasika temperament will worship the lower gods or the demigods or the celestials entities, because they are invested with greed, with selfishness, and they would like to see immediate results of their worship. And then the people with tamasika disposition predominant in them will worship the spirits, the ghosts, because they don't know better. And even explaining to them that one does not bow down to entities which are below the human form, the human dimension, is not going to get us anything. There are no fruits that are resultant in such forms of worship. They are incapable of understanding because of their dense mental faculties. Shloka 5. Men who practice dire penance of an arbitrary type, not sanctioned by the scriptures, and who are full of hypocrisy and egotism, and are obsessed with desire, attachment, and pride of power. So now Krishna goes on to talk about people who undertake severe austerities, the tapasya type of people, right? So Krishna explains here that people who undertake such severe austerities which are not sanctioned by the Veda Shastras, they are motivated by their ego, and they are obsessed with the desire for power, because that is what would be resultant in an arbitrary type of undergoing such penances. Shloka 6. And who emaciate the elements constituting their body, as well as me, the Supreme Spirit dwelling in their heart, know these senseless people to have a disposition of the Asuras. So here Krishna says that whence people undergo such types of penances, austerities, they tend to undertake severe fasting to the point of starvation, right? And therefore they subject the Panchabhutas, the Panchendriyas, the 5 elements that constitute the body, the five senses that constitute the body. They subject such to extreme pressures. And in addition to that, Krishna says that they also deprive nourishment of the soul, the Supreme Spirit dwelling in their heart. The Antaryamin is also affected by such extreme forms of austerities which are not prescribed in the Shastras. And therefore, Krishna says that such people have tendencies of the kind of the Asuras because they only seek power. They do not seek the divine. Shloka 7. Food also, which is agreeable to different men according to their innate disposition, is of three kinds, and likewise sacrifice, penance, and charity too are of three kinds each. Hear their distinction from me. So now Krishna in this shloka explains that the next few shlokas in this chapter is going to be of the type of food that people generally prefer. So he's going to explain to us the nature of people, the Sattvika, Rajasika and Tamasika, what type of food they naturally eat, they prefer eating, their favorite foods, and by which we can understand our own temperaments, our own nature. And also he goes on to say sacrifice, tyaga, penance, tapa, yajnaha, tapaha and danam. Sacrifice, penance and charity, they too are undertaken differently by people with different temperaments and different natures. And in the following shlokas we are going to see their distinctions. Shloka 8. Foods which promote longevity, intelligence, vigor, health, happiness and cheerfulness, and which are sweet, bland, substantial and naturally agreeable, are dear to the Sattvika type of men. And so here Krishna says that those foods which are light on the stomach, which are light on the body, which are succulent and juicy, they promote good health, they promote longevity of the human body. They also contribute to the sharpness of the mental faculties, to the intelligence of the being. And such food are preferable for men who are sattvika natures. Now, for those of you who have been to homeopathy doctors, the first initial interview will always consist of questions as to what are your favorite foods, what do you like to eat. So the homeopathic doctor first understands the nature, the temperament of the patient, and thereby prescribes the medicines that is required to do so. Shloka 9. Foods which are bitter, acid, salty, over-hot, pungent, dry and burning, and which cause suffering, grief and sickness, are dear to the Rajasika type of men. So people who have the Rajasika quality predominant in them, they naturally gravitate towards foods which are salty, which are pungent, which are very hot, acidic in nature, and therefore that will result in sickness and suffering because it taxes the system to a great extent. Shloka 10. Food which is half cooked or half ripe, insipid, putrid, stale, and polluted, impure, is dear to men of tamasika disposition. So people who are not so refined, who have not the sharpness of intellect, or who are predominantly tamasika by nature, will be content to eat leftovers, cooked in the morning, consumed at night, cooked a day or 2 days earlier and eaten 2 days later, right? Stale food, insipid, not balanced, unbalanced food which can also be half cooked, essentially. And nowadays we have a lot of these because of working professionals. They feel that they need to cook well ahead of time and store it in the fridge and then eat it during the course of the following few days or maybe the entire week, which is not the smartest thing to do because it only contributes to their ill health, irritability of temper, and and also a general feeling of ill health. Shloka 11. The sacrifice which is offered as ordained by scriptural injunctions by men who expect no return and who believe that such sacrifices must be performed is sattvika in nature. Now the sacrifice, which is the term that is used here, is actually essentially what Krishna is talking about, yajna. The yajna that we perform, that we undertake to perform for various reasons, which is prescribed in the Shastras. But to perform them, because it is their duty to perform, and without being invested with the results, without making a conditional result, those type of sacrifices undertaken by sattvika characters, because they are of the purest of them, and therefore their only intent is for the good of the entire universe, and therefore they undertake such yajnas for loka kalyanam. They do it so there is benefit to the maximum number of people and not essentially benefiting them per se, because their ideology, their point of view, their very philosophy is that when everybody benefits, I too will benefit. Shloka 12. That sacrifice, however, which is performed for the sake of mere show, or even with an eye to its fruit, know it to be rajasika, Arjuna. So, that sacrifice, the yajna which are undertaken for ostentatious purposes, as a matter of social status, a symbol of social status, for mere showing off of the wealth and splendor of the family or the person, or even precisely because they are invested in the result of such a yajna, those are undertaken by rajasika type of people. Shloka 13. A sacrifice which has no respect for scriptural injunctions, in which no food is offered and no sacrificial fees are paid, which is without sacred chant and devoid of faith, is said to be tamasika. So this is a self-explanatory shloka that arbitrarily undertaken yajnas having no respect for the people who are doing the yajna, for no respect for the shastras, which we find in today's modern terms. People generally say to the priest, oh, we don't have time to go through all this, cut short your process, keep it as short as possible. And we arbitrarily snip and snap uh, you know processes and methodologies that are supposed to be undertaken in a yajna, merely because we don't have the patience to sit through those processes. So all of these are said to be undertaken by people with tamasika nature predominant in them. Shloka 14. Worship of gods, the Brahmanas, one's elders and wise men, purity, straightness, continence, and harmlessness, this is called bodily penance or tapaha. So therefore here Krishna talks about that tapasya or tapaha which is undertaken to worship the divine, one's elders and wise men who are of the highest of purity, straightforwardness, such is known as such bodily penance tapas is therefore undertaken by sattvika people. Shloka 15. Words which cause no annoyance to others and are truthful, agreeable, and wholesome, as well as the study of the Vedas and other Shastras, and the practice of repetition of the divine name, this is known as the austerity of speech. So here Krishna talks about the type of speech people who are spiritually evolved, people who are on the path of spiritual evolution, must take great care and be constantly aware of, is to use words which are truthful, agreeable, to keep the tone and the pitch of the voice in a uniform matter, to be pleasant and harmonious to the ears, to not cause annoyance and irritability or agitation of the mind of the listeners, and also words which have the knowledge of the Shastras in them and the divine practice of the divine name. Shloka 16. Cheerfulness of mind, placidity, habit of contemplation of God, control of the mind, and perfect purity of inner feelings. All this is called austerity of the mind. So we have just looked at austerity of the body, the tapaha of the body. Now we have looked at austerity of speech, and now austerity of the mind, which should always remain cheerful, which should always be in constant remembrance of the divine, which should be in complete self-discipline and self-control, without arbitrary thoughts and unnecessary thoughts, and which is a reflection of the inner purity. That is called austerity of the mind, because that then becomes a prasad, manaha prasadaha, to offer the mind itself as a prasad to the divine. Shloka 17. This threefold penance performed with supreme faith by yogis, expecting no return, is called sattvika. So those yogis who undertake austerity of the body, austerity of the mind, and austerity of the speech, and therefore without any expectation, is undertaken by those people with sattvika nature. Shloka 18. The penance which is performed for the sake of renown, honor, and worship, as well as for any other selfish gain, either in all sincerity or by way of ostentation, and yields an uncertain and momentary fruit, has been spoken of here as Rajasika. Therefore, here what Krishna is talking about is that penance or tapaha which is undertaken for selfish reasons, right? For the sake of renown, to establish a name for oneself, for name and fame, honor and money, and that type of yajna is undertaken by people with predominantly Rajasika temperament, and the fruits or the results is uncertain, and even if they do receive some results, it will only be momentary. It would not last long. Shloka 19. Austerity which is practiced through perversity and is accompanied with self-mortification or is intended to harm others, such austerity has been declared as tamasika. So here, self-mortification, we see a lot of these examples in certain communities and certain type of people, where there is a lot of body, where body is put to extreme tests and extreme stress as well, and which are not the types which are not given in which are not prescribed in the Shastras. Such type of austerities are undertaken by people with tamasika temperaments, and also undertaken with an intent to harm others. Shloka 20. Here in the next three shlokas, 20, 21 and 22, Krishna talks about the three types of dhanam that is done. Now, dhanam, briefly, though it has been translated as gift, is not necessarily a gift, nor is it a sacrifice. The etymology of the word dhanam is daha plus annam. So daha means to give away, annam is of course food. So essentially that is why in Hindu traditions the highest form of dhanam is always annadhanam, because it is only with annadhanam that people will say, enough, I am satisfied now. There is no other form of dhanam in which people will say, this is enough. No matter how much of money, wealth, material goods we give, people would always want more. There is always something else that catches their eye. There's always some new product available in the market. But it is only with food that you say, enough, I have a full stomach. Right? So let us look at these shlokas in the light of dhanam. A dhanam is bestowed with a sense of duty on one who is no benefactor, when a fit place, suitable time, and a deserving person are available, that dhanam has been pronounced as sattvika. So therefore, men with sattvika temperament, and the act of dhanam itself is termed as sattvika when it is given away at a fit time, at the time, the right place, and to a deserving person. It is not an arbitrary decision that is undertaken, but a decision that is taken um, with a great deal of thought put into the matter. Shloka 21. A dhanam which is bestowed in a grudging spirit and with the object of getting a service in return or in the hope of obtaining a reward is called rajasika. So that dhanam which is invested in selfishness with expectations is termed as of rajasika. Shloka 22. Dhanam which is made without good grace and in a disdainful spirit out of time and place unto undeserving persons is said to be tamasika. So again self-explanatory, because tamasika are people who are essentially steeped in ignorance, lack the necessary discerning ability, the viveka, and therefore even the very act of dhanam by such people, termed tamasika, which is made in a disdainful manner without any grace or etiquette and to undeserving people with no thought to time and place, is also called tamasika. Shloka 23. Om Tat Sat. This has been declared as the threefold appellation of the Absolute, who is truth, consciousness, and bliss solidified. By that the Brahmanas and the Vedas, as well as sacrifices, were created at the cosmic dawn. So here Krishna gives us the three esoteric words: Om, Tat, Sat, which is the threefold indication, symbolism of the Absolute, which is the truth, the consciousness, and the bliss, and by which vibratory frequency the Brahmanas, the Vedas, the entire creation was brought forth at the time of the cosmic dawn. Shloka 24. Acts of sacrifice, charity, austerity, as enjoined by sacred precepts, are always commenced by noble souls, given to the recitation of Vedic chants with utterance of the divine name Om. Therefore, here Krishna talks about sacrifice and charity and austerity, which are always accompanied by the sacred Vedic Shastras, and which are commenced with the divine Om, the universal cosmic vibrations, are sattvika in nature. And that is the reason why every sacred act, every yajna, every act or thought or deed begins with the sacred Om. Shloka 25. With the idea that all this belongs to God, who is denoted by the appellation Tat, acts of sacrifice and austerity, as well as acts of charity of various kinds, are performed by the seekers of blessedness, expecting no return for them. So that Krishna says is that with a deep understanding that everything in the universe is nothing but the cosmic energy. There is nothing that we can call our own, because everything that has come forth is that from the divine, and everything returns back to the divine. And therefore, when those acts of sacrifice and austerity and charity are performed, expecting no return for them, because it is what it is, it needs to be done. Om Tat. Shloka 26. The name of God Sat is employed in the sense of truth and goodness, and the word Sat is also used in the sense of a praiseworthy act, Arjuna. Sat, which we all know is truth, the absolute, and therefore it is always employed in that symbolizing dharma. Shloka 27. Steadfastness in sacrifice, austerity, and charity is likewise spoken of as Sat, and action for the sake of God is verily termed as Sat. And therefore, undertaking acts of sacrifice, austerity, and charity, yajnaha, tapaha, danaha, dhanam, undertaking all of these three in straightforwardness and steadfastness of spirit and mind is spoken of as Sat, because it is in keeping in tune with the divine. 27. An oblation which is offered, a gift given, an austerity practiced, and whatever good deed is performed without faith, it is all termed as naught. Therefore, it is of no avail here or hereafter. And finally, Krishna says in the last shloka of this chapter that undertaking all acts of sacrifice, yajnaha, tapaha, dhanam, without shraddha results in nothing. It doesn't give us good results, it doesn't give us any results, either in the physical dimension or in the celestial dimensions that the soul travels after the body dies. And therefore, finally, Krishna explains the importance of Shraddha, and he says, without Shraddha, without Om Tat Sat, by which every act is undertaken, every action is prescribed in the Veda Shastras, without Shraddha, it brings no results to anybody, and it is of no use to perform such actions, of such acts of charity, or such acts of sacrifice or austerity. Om Tatsadita Shrimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayan Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade ShraddhaTrayaVibhagaYogo Nama Saptadashodhyayaha. Om Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Thus in the Upanishad sung by the Lord, the science of Brahma, the scripture of yoga, the dialogue between Shri Krishna and Arjuna ends the 17th chapter titled The Yoga of the Division of the Three Types of Faith. Om Yogesho Satchidanandam Vasudevau Rajapriyam धर्मसंस्थापकं वीरं कृष्णो वन्दे जगद्गुरुं श्रीकृष्णो वन्दे जगद्गुरुम् ॐ श्रीकृष्णार्पणमस्तु।